Hi, everyone. Welcome to tonight's event. It's playing for my computer. I was wondering if everyone can start wrapping conversations and have a seat. We should be getting started soon.
Kia. She's going to help you guys set those out if needed.
Can I tell her?
Of course. I think you need to turn it on.
Good evening. Hey, we're going to get started, so if y'all could go ahead and take seats. If we have some people that are standing, we're going to grab a few other seats. So we're trying to get a sense of how many seats we need.
Hey, I think this microphone's going to be better.
Great.
That looks like there.
Can you get that?
I'm going to turn on the other one.
All right. Y'all ready?
Let's do that.
All right, let's do this. Everybody have a cocktail because we're going to be talking for a while. Refills now. At my parties, they come around and fill you up. So maybe at this party, we can do an interim fill up. We'll just establish the house rules. If you need a refill, get up and get one. Because anybody that comes out on a Monday night for a corporate innovation panel is pretty awesome in my book. And you should get refills when you want them. But thanks to everyone for coming out tonight. We've got a really great group of folks. This is our first corporate innovation meetup. It's brought to you by Capital Factory. Thank you to the Capital Factory team for hosting us and sponsoring the space, and a great events team helping us out. It's also sponsored by FinTech Austin, who helped get out the word because we have some FinTech conversation going on tonight. And then Softmatch, which is a company that I co-founded with my colleague Jackson. Where's Jackson? Jackson Giles. We call him Action Jackson because he is amazing. And we're focused on, actually for about 4 or 5 years now, we've been doing corporate innovation consulting and helping organizations kind of figure out how to make the most of their efforts in that space. And now we're building a software product that, like Salesforce manages the sales pipeline, our product manages the innovation pipeline. So we work with a lot of corporate innovation leaders, and that's all I'll say about that. I'm not going to bore you with my product. But tonight we have a great panel. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, briefly, who you are, what you're doing now, where your company intersects with startups or corporate innovation, and then we'll go from there.
Great. So I'm Jamie Smith. I'm currently the Chief Information Officer of University of Phoenix. I've been there almost a year now, so I guess it's a year next week, which is pretty exciting. And then previously was with a company called ServiceMaster, which did a lot of innovation in the home services space. We're getting a little... I'm going to try to turn this one off. I know, it's just too much. It can't
They're making popcorn.
Excitement. There we go. There's no on-off button either.
It's on the bottom.
Okay. Now this one's off.
Hello, AV, can you help with the popcorn?
So
Okay.
as a CIO, AV is my least favorite thing to support, by the way, just to let you know. So I've done it globally for multiple companies, and it's never fun. It never goes perfectly. So, but I'll try to keep going real fast in the sake of time. So University of Phoenix actually invented the category of online education for the working adult. So a lot of other corporations are trying to talk about digital transformation. I like to think that we talk about digital reawakening, so from our side.
Hi, I'm Tina Wyand, and I'm the Chief Product Officer at HomeAway. One of our key brands in North America is VRBO. We just did a rebranding launch last week. We now pronounce it Verbo, which we found out through, through surveys that roughly 50% of our partners and travelers pronounced it that way. So it is kind of funny. Yeah, so it's kind of cool. So check out the new brand. We're pretty excited about it. So I've been at HomeAway for about 2.5 years and been in Austin for 2.5 years. Prior to that, just speaking of innovation, I worked for IAC Labs, and I started up a social content business within IAC, in which I had to put a business plan together, a product strategy together, and get funded. They did offer to let me spin out the company and buy it, with them as still retaining majority share, and I decided not to do that. But anyway, so innovation is kind of near and dear to my heart, and really happy to be here and talk about it.
Great. Thanks, Tina. My name is Mike Hansen. I'm with Discover Financial. Discover is the credit card company that came out of Sears about 30 years ago. You know, boring old credit card, cash back. And we're a little
Best
bit
cashback card there is.
Thank you. Any customers out there? Oh, we love you. Yeah, thank you. The one guy in the back. All right, I got cards for everybody. So we're a credit card. We issue the credit card. That means we borrow money at 1 or 2% and loan money at 11, 12%. We make 10% interest on that. But we're also our own network, so we process all the transactions, and we touch about 13 million merchants. So we're end-to-end, which is a little different. And it probably because Sears went to Visa and asked for a Sears card, and they said, well, we can give you a Visa. And Sears said, no thanks, we'll do it ourselves. And so that was the birth of Discover. I had innovation. Innovation at Discover basically means things that people don't have time to pay attention to, like blockchain, AR, VR, AI. So
Buzzword bingo drink.
yep, there you go. So we're not the innovation that just squeezes money out of the business. We're the innovation that helps turn it into a payments company.
All right, good evening. My name is Helio Kamogawa. I'm from ExxonMobil. I've been working there for 15 years. I am a Brazilian employee, currently based in Houston. And we work on a fuels and lubricants company. So if you ever bought gas at a gas station or lubricants, Mobil 1, the best lubricant out there, right? Then you're probably using one of our products. Our team works on a different way. We don't have a VC arm. We don't have an accelerator program. So we work very customer back. So we do a lot of research on customers and consumers. We try to understand what their pain points and needs are. And then based on that, we're going to go search for solutions which can or cannot include startups. Our most recent deal was the Yoshi. If you're familiar with them, it's fuel delivery. So if you need to get gas on your car and you don't want to drive to a gas station, you can just hit an app, fuel me up. It will show up at your doorstep and fuel your car. So that's one of the examples of innovation we do.
Does it bring beef jerky? No?
Not yet, but I can add that to the suggestion box. That's it.
Well, that's a great segue. So just a quick poll of the audience so we kind of know. How many of you are in corporate innovation at a corporation? All right. A couple of folks. How many of you are founders of a startup? And how many of you work for a startup that are not founders? Are awesome. Okay. Any students? Yay. And, oh, yay, some of my students and my colleagues at MSTC. Okay, so since there's so many startups in the room, I'd love to have a conversation about each of your companies, and this part's gonna have to be kind of quickly, but Helio already commented on, I'd love to know from each of you, since we have to pass the mic, you can answer all the questions at once, but do you have an internal acceleration program? Or if not an acceleration program, what programs do you have that intersect with startups? And do you work with any external accelerators? If so, which ones? Just to kind of get a sense, because you're each from different industries. We have education and travel. What do you say? The travel. Energy, financial services. So I'm curious, as leaders in your space, what you're doing with how you intersect with startups. And I'm happy to pass my mic too, but.
So I'll get started, if that's okay. So we work in startups in 3 ways right now. We do pilots when we think there's a suitable product for us. We work with them as partners when we think there's an intersection of interest between your customers and our customers. And the 3rd way is to accelerate innovation. So if we come up with a concept, we do a market scan, we find out that there is a company out there that already does it. Why should we go through the trouble as a corporate that is going to be slower, more expensive, and try to do it ourselves? So in that case, then we're going to go and partner with, or try to partner, if there is anything we can add value to the startup as well, and we're going to go to the market together. So those are the 3 ways in which we leverage startups right now. We don't have an accelerator program, as I said, but we are participating on the Capital Factory Accelerator program. So on Friday, I'll be heading out to Dallas with Gordon and team to look at how do they manage their deal flow, what we can learn from it, and how can we potentially benefit from it as well.
And Helio, do you all look for things that are exclusively within the energy industry, or are there areas of interest that may be something else, customer service or other components?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially my area, which is more geared towards commercial innovation. We looked across the spectrum. So we look at tech startups that may enable some of the capabilities we need. We may look at different business models or different customers and consumers that you may not think it makes sense. So one of the examples is we provide fuel cards for Uber drivers. So Uber is a commercial consumer type of startup that has an intersection of potential customers. And by going together, we can potentially make a better value proposition for both parties.
Okay, great, thank you. And pass it down.
Hi, at Discover, we do not have an internal accelerator that runs classes of programs through. We typically have internal business units that have particular problems, and then we'll go scour the market and identify 5 or 6, and we'll have bake-offs to bring startups in.
We approach it a couple ways, similar to Helio. If there is a particular area that our customers we think we need to meet, we'll go out and we'll look for it. And so we just completed an acquisition late last year, Pillow in San Francisco, that helps apartment managers allow their owners of the apartments rent them out short term, and yet they can manage the security. They know who's coming, they know who's checking out. And they also get a cut, so they're pretty motivated by this. And so that's something that we felt, and we went out, and Pillow was about a 14-person company, and it was a really nice culture fit, so it's something we look for. Internally, we don't have an official accelerator program, but what we do, we manage the product. We have about 2,000 plus people, engineers, design, product, and what we do is we break everything down into portfolio areas. And if there's a particular portfolio area that puts together an idea or kind of pitches an idea and asks for funding, the CTO and I kind of get together and we decide if we're going to do that, and we give them $1 million or some amount of money and a runway. And so we launched our virtual tours platform through that program, and a few other things that we've launched that are up and coming that we're pretty excited about. So there's kind of an informal internal where we do try and foster creativity and innovation internally, but it's not like any official accelerator type program that people go through.
Good. Yeah, we're a little bit kind of early stage at that reawakening at University of Phoenix. I will say in a past life, we created an internal accelerator. It was a formal program. We actually leveraged an outside company that ran an accelerator to select our cohort, stand it up. We were focused on really early stage things in that. In addition, we would find those partnerships and then take kind of an investment stake in them. So we funded multiple Series A so that we could kind of ride the wave up together, essentially. So we wanted it to be more beneficial than just a standard investment. It was something we were going to integrate into our platform. So we found that kind of mutual win pretty successful.
Great, thank you. So a real diversity of approaches. I'd love to have a little bit of conversation about. I feel like, having worked in the space, there's often a disconnect between, Michael had shared with me earlier, I asked him, sort of the volume of things he looked at, and he was like, well, at any given point, I have 50 or so active projects, right? But then when you're the founder who's working on a proof of concept, oftentimes it feels like the most important thing you have going on right now. And there's a big disconnect between, the two perspectives. So I'd love to have a conversation about culture, but not just culture in the culture, kind of way, but culture in the sense of you're all leaders in the space. You are the ones that are bridging the gap between what your internal business culture is, but also knowing, what it's like to work with a 14-person startup or a small company. So not everybody has to answer the question, we don't have to onesie-twosie, but if you have a strong feeling about culture or some things that could work, please share with the audience. How can startups more effectively work with larger companies?
Well, I guess I'll start with.
Or maybe I should say, how can larger companies more effectively work with startups?
That's exactly where I was going to start. So because of the fact that, I don't know if you guys love working with purchasing departments and legal teams and all those things. We'll give you that opportunity in spades, which is great. But I do think part of the challenge for us is, we are so used to this very regimented way in the way that we do it. Bringing someone in that doesn't fit that mold, things like intellectual property. What if we hit on a great idea together? Become a really big deal. A lot of the gain sharing becomes a really big deal. And one of the things I had kind of spoke about earlier was I've seen a lot of anti-patterns of startups that try to bend what they're doing to the opportunity that's in front of them for a big corporation, and they kind of lose their North Star, right? So and there's a fine difference between a pivot that makes sense with where you're going, and then just making something bespoke for a corporation. We actually had a startup we worked with for multiple years to create our student financial aid system. And we recently implemented it after about 4.5 years of both of us working together. They had a successful exit to Oracle, but we're still the only customer, right? So it ended up being a little too bespoke, a little too much for us, even for Oracle's liking, right? So I would say just stay true to yourself as you're working through that, because we will try to bully you around, for sure.
And while you have the mic, I wanted to ask you the same question. Do you look at things that are outside of education? Like what areas of your business do you look for things?
Absolutely. So around anything that's going to improve the experience, right? So a lot of our experience, although it is online, it's not just the educational experience. So customer service, digital onboarding, a lot of things that you may not just think, oh, that's ed tech, because it lives as part of a larger ecosystem. To not miss out on, we do have some things we're interested in blockchain and some of the other areas that are tangentially education. Yeah. But I think we look for things that we can plug into our platform, and that platform will make the experience better, even if it's just a feature. So.
Great.
I think it is, I guess, culture, it's really super important from our perspective for a couple reasons, and I don't know if this helps you in interacting with a large company or not, but it's something you should try and pay attention to, and it's things to watch for, and it's easy things like just even in how meetings are conducted. So, at HomeAway, one of the things that we push really top down, but it's pervasive in everything, is this culture of trust, and there's ways that you demonstrate it. So not just saying trust, but it's like, are people open, and are they actively participating? Are you seeing people come into the room, pay attention, ask questions, or are they showing up late on their phone, doing 100 other things? And you want that culture in which people are paying attention and being accountable and asking questions and have that openness. And so, and the reason we pay so much attention to this, and we work this in all of our feedback forums, is because people who bring their A game every single day and are open to feedback, so they're not defensive about feedback, means that they're open to new ideas, and we think that fosters innovation. And so, I know it's a little not quite direct in terms of the puts and takes with innovation and small companies and large companies and startups. But as a startup, one of the things I respected a lot about the Pillow founders is they looked for a culture fit as much as we were looking for one, and so it ended up being a really good fit.
So one of the things we have learned so far is that people see these amazing startups out there and they jump to the assumption that they need to invest in it. So a lot of people come to me and say, hey, I found out about this great startup. How do we invest in them? So the first question I typically ask is, okay, how are we going to benefit from investing in this company? And how is the company going to benefit from that as well? Because being a corporate, you typically want to be a strategic investor, right? So you can influence, you can help. And if there is really not this exchange of value, it becomes really challenging. The other thing is to consider is that the startups could use help in different ways. I think I'm learning that myself. They can use some help by getting their first customer. We can help by having joint marketing campaigns. We can help by providing the mentoring. So there are different ways in which we can help shape the startup that is not directly related to an investment. So that has been one of the greatest learnings for us.
Oh, I love that you brought that up. We'll let Michael go, but we'll go back to that comment about other things. Well, because actually it's a good question for you, which is what other ways are there, to benefit? That's something that, quite frankly, I've only recently become more aware of. Is like, oh, I'm a startup. I could, if I'm doing something in AI and I'm looking for data to train my, machine learning algorithm, like, what sort of tools can you all give us for that?
All right, I'll do that one first. So two of the assets that we have are data and then also regulatory and compliance architecture that startups just don't have and usually want to try to avoid. And so you try to disintermediate on the customer, and then we'll keep doing all the hard work, but really it's non-delegable, so you have to you have to tap into both those things. So we can give people a commercial agreement. Sometimes we give commercial agreements instead of an investment because, frankly, it's a little bit easier. Then we don't have ownership duties, we don't have oversight duties, and it's like non-dilutive equity for you. It's, you know, co-development dollars. So that's a pretty good relationship with a big company. So get a service agreement, don't sell them stock, take advantage of their data, and don't run away from regulatory compliance. You know, learn from it.
Did you have a culture comment?
Yeah, I had one image I wanted to plant in case it's helpful. So raise your hand if you've ever seen like The Right Stuff or Apollo 13, any kind of NASA, you know, space movies. So there's always like a culture misfit, startups to big corporates. And in all of these movies, you always have like the astronaut team in the sky, and then you have the command center, and in the command center there's like the oxygen guy and the structural integrity guy, and everybody has something to do that saves everybody's life inside the room. And there's always one guy in that room who has the headset on, and in every movie and at NASA, if you take a tour, his title is called Capcom. He's the capsule communicator. And all the communication that goes up goes through that guy, and all the communication that comes down goes through that guy. So that person has to be able to speak astronaut, you know, and he's trained in the mission and what all the astronauts do. And he has to understand, you know, what are all these people doing in the room who just want to save everybody's life. And so you as a startup have to kind of try to find that person, you know, on your team or in your partner. So I try to let people on my team know that it's our job to be able to, you know, look outside and speak astronaut and understand the vision. But then when somebody inside says, you know, but we have a compliance issue or a legal issue or a finance issue, you know, that's all the, you know, well-intentioned people in the room who are just trying to save everybody's life. And so you got to have somebody bridge the gap. And I don't think it's really a culture change, but you have to make the startup environment fit with the big company environment. So that Capcom, the talk to the astronauts, the recognize that if you're an astronaut, all the people in the room are not trying to slow you down. They're trying to, you know, save the spaceship. So that's kind of hopefully a helpful image.
I'm not doing my geek duty. I'm just going to watch rom-coms. That's too confusing. Anybody else want to talk a little bit about what you have besides mergers and acquisitions as or investment as value to a startup?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. On the investment side, we had had a couple of very successful exits and very nice financially. And the first question was, now what do we do with this money, right? We didn't even know because you didn't plan ahead for that. And so the money was kind of the least of it as we got through. When I think of kind of University of Phoenix as an example, we have 1 million alumni that have graduated from University of Phoenix. We have petabytes of data on behavioral things and ways that you can test your ideas in cohorts and whatever. So I think the money is only just something that gets us to pay attention to it in our list of priorities so that we knew about it. But you think about kind of getting access to that treasure trove of data and or having a way to experiment very quickly, improve out ideas and iterate. Like that's really the secret sauce. And so that's where if we find that mutual benefit, then it makes sense. But I think, you know, we talked a little bit about too POCs and things. We can spin up hundreds of proof of concept kind of exercises as even, you know, roughly $1 billion company. And so we could overwhelm a lot of startups very quickly. And so when you know, people say, should we charge for this or not, or how should we negotiate? I think charging for it in a way is just that ticket that gets us to pay attention to it also, so that we don't spin up more ideas than we can actually pay attention to, because we could be notorious for that. So.
The infamous "should I charge them for it"
Yes.
question.
I kind of hit it ahead of time. So
Yeah,
that was good,
yeah, that's a good one. Tina, you've been through many acquisitions at HomeAway. Y'all grew through acquisition. How many companies do you have, and are they all integrated?
Yes.
Like on the product side, are they all?
They are.
Any run separately as their own little fiefdoms?
No. Well, we have a software company, but fortunately now we're officially all on one platform, all one company. And a lot of the push for that was for the data, like to be a platform and especially two-sided marketplace. If we have stuff running all over the place, we're not actually just, able to scale and get the signals at the level that we need to so we can improve our product. I did want to +1 what Helio said around the fact that And we did this when we acquired Apartment Jet and Pillow, which was we sat with them and said, this is not about us telling you what to do or shoving everything at you, or it's what can we do to accelerate your growth. We're going to leave you alone. You come meet with all the people. We're here to listen, and then what can we do to accelerate your growth? And I think that's the way companies, especially when they either work with other startups or they acquire a startup, they make that problem of, hey, now we're going to tell you exactly what you're going to do, and they just drown the company and doesn't let it reach its potential and grow it. But we deliberately said, okay, what assets do we have where we can help them? And it's a little bit like the example you use. It's a lot of the back office stuff, not to drown them, but just to like accelerate them, to let them focus.
Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the assets that y'all have to offer a startup. In the spirit of kind of bridging that gap, the startups have, you have business drivers that we actually have in startup land too, which is investors that want returns, right? Don't we have 3 publicly traded and 1 private equity? So we have 3 publicly traded companies whose investors are the public, and 1 private equity company. So you have your own expectations of return by a certain period of time that drive, you know, when you do things, right? So we talk in innovation, corporate innovation, we talk about incremental transformation, which is like take an existing product and mildly increment it, versus transformational innovation, which is open up whole new revenue channels, doing something differently. And so how do you balance, because I think it's important for startups to understand where they fit in your business objectives when they're talking to you, right? What are who's expecting what? If you're on a PE track, you've got to produce a return by a certain period of time or nobody's happy, yes. Right? And so talk a little bit about like how you factor in the expectation of the market with how much you're pushing. And you know, a lot of times startups come in and they're like, I'm disintermediating your whole business. But a lot of times the best way to get a deal done is to be like, hey, I can help you pick up those rotting cherries on the floor that are just core to your business and can make your customer service experience better. I don't know. That's not really a question, but riff on that. Make me look good. Make me look like I know how to ask a question and moderate.
Well, I can start real fast because we're private equity held, formerly publicly traded, and then I also ran kind of our innovation space at the previous company, which was formerly private equity held, now publicly traded, right? And so seeing kind of the difference in that time horizon is really interesting. I will say on the publicly traded side, because of the quarterly cadence, it was very important to give this a safe space, and not to say there's a lack of transparency, but just to say it's a fund, right? It's a fund and that you're doing things and whatever, because you don't want people to ask about it on the quarterly earnings calls all the time, because that's just going to suck all the oxygen out of the program, because it doesn't work that way. I think for private equity, you know, being roughly 2 years into, you know, let's say maybe an average 5 to 7 year hold period, the investors are looking at those things that are much closer to kind of adjacent things that can make our core product better, right? So getting to that sustainable growth, because ultimately that's what you want, you know, kind of as an exit from a private equity fund, much like venture, we all have kind of our own metrics. I think where we get a little bit sideways is we're used to operating in the world of corporate metrics, which are things like EBITDA and whatever. We are not always focused on things like, you know, monthly active customer growth or whatever, even if it's not profitable. And so there's this clash when you get between those two, where if we can find that middle ground somewhere where you can kind of, you know, like BASF, not make the things, but make the things we already do better, yeah. Right? That's an easier way to get in the door. I think the other thing that happens if you come in saying you're disintermediating or whatever, our corporate antibodies and white blood cells are immediately going to attack that idea, right? And so, because we can't tell good ideas from bad ideas sometimes if they look threatening to us, we're like, oh, that's a bad idea, let's kill that. And especially for UOP, who used to be roughly $5 billion a year, and then, you know, we're kind of about $1 billion a year now. We have outsized antibodies that are still in that blood system, and so we'll kill them even more quickly. And so I wouldn't lead with that, right? Unless you know that you're in a safe space, right, among friends where they're like that. But really, there are a lot of opportunities for that kind of adjacent, sustaining innovation where you can come in and do it faster and do it better, and we can leverage it very quickly.
I'll just add that's what we look for, is we actually look for something that's augmenting our current, and that's going to, there's a formula that when there's an acquisition, I would say Expedia does a good job of protecting street expectations and giving a runway, but there is a formula and there's an expectation of return. But most of the either internal investments or the external acquisitions are for a significant sort of game changer, or to really add and accelerate the business versus, kind of an add-on.
You have to speak.
I guess I was, from a corporate perspective, we have a very mature business in credit card lending, banking, student loans, international with Diners Club, and we have a nascent business opportunity that's fintech and payments and enabling global payments to flow through the U.S. from around the world. And in part of our business, there's probably a 20-year history of innovation looking like waste, and just so you gotta be mindful of that when you're bringing something new into an incumbent, that the people who you deal with and your customer inside is going to be facing that. So you got to have a strong business case, and help your internal customer tie it to a good business outcome pretty early in the process.
And for me, is it on? Can you hear me?
Can you hear him now?
It only works for me.
Not anymore. For us, I think there's a couple of things that is interesting. One is, as a startup, when you go talk to a corporate, know what they're after, right? Know what you're looking for, know who you're talking to, and spend some time on a pre-call so you can understand their motivations. They maybe want to buy your product. They maybe want to go together with you to do something with your customers. So really try to understand what you're trying to achieve with that meeting, that demo, because we have different motivations as corporates as well, and the way we do deals is different, right? In the case of ExxonMobil Fuels and Lubricants right now, the investments come out of the balance sheet. So what that means is that it somehow has to directly benefit the business that is investing in it. So we're not here for the equity divestment and capitalize on the investment we have made exclusively from the equity. We're really looking to advance our offer, strategically approach our different customers. So if you're very effective in doing that, then I believe you have higher chances of being successful. The catch is, as corporates, many times we don't know what we want, right? So I think trying to show us the art of the possible, why your platform is relevant to us, is also very important.
What a great point. So many microphones, so little time. Do any of you have corporate venture funds, or is all your activity funded off the balance sheet? Yeah, yeah. There's a few corporate venture funds that fund, transformational M&A activity, but they're measured separately by basically their investment return as a fund, and if it, conveniently benefits the business. I mean, generally they like for them to be associated, but it's not a requirement. So just because you're talking to Salesforce Ventures doesn't mean you're talking to Salesforce, or Merck, has an investment fund, or any of those things. Okay, so we're, just a heads up, we're going to open it up to questions, to Q&A, because I know y'all want to talk to them and don't want to listen to me. But I do want one more question, which is, with regard to innovation and intersection with startups, what sort of things do y'all measure, right? Because you're all making these investments in programs, whether it's internal acceleration or external partnerships. What sort of things do you measure, and is there a way that we can help you do that better?
So for each project, we have an anticipated learning or hypothesis, and we test and track hypothesis and load evidence into a system, and we track it pretty closely, because then it allows us to learn through time, even if we have people transitions, and it also allows us to tell a pretty good story of return to value for the investment in innovation.
What kind of hypothesis?
So a hypothesis might be that customers will like a different option in transportation than buying and owning cars, in the future, and that they would be willing to pay for it as a service. And so we'll do some experiments around something like that.
Okay, a business hypothesis.
Yeah.
Yeah. They've shut me off.
Oh, you're off now? So you know, I think it varied a little bit based on stage, right? So kind of in the previous more venture-like role, we had kind of the traditional gates that you're going through, and the metrics were more like, not necessarily you're going to get X profit or whatever, right? It's what are we going to learn by doing this? And so in the case of one of our startups, it was more around if we implement kind of an Uber-like service model for home services, are we going to see greater engagement with the product? It didn't, you know, things like retention and other things are very much a lagging indicator, so it would take way too long to measure that. So kind of for each area, we had to assess it. You know, what I wish we could measure and we're better at, frankly, and maybe you can help us, back to that part of the question, is kind of back to validated learning, right? So what, you know, we're very good at measuring very hard kind of dollars and cents, and you know, this thing ticks up on the chart, you know, one tick or whatever. We're very bad at measuring what we learned, even if we didn't get the outcome that we thought. And so some of the things that we have the best chance to learn together are things that actually don't probably work when we scaled them, but why not, and what did we do? If you could help us look at that lens, because you all do it every single day, that would help us become kind of that. You know, I think business used to be like this efficiency competition, and now it's shifted into a learning competition. And if we don't, you know, kind of generate that internal learning engine, we're never going to win. So, help us, please.
So I've got a question. This is a what do we measure example. Who talks to something that's inanimate that you didn't talk to 5 years ago? Anybody? HomePod, Echo, car, TV, all the above, remote control. So we would do tests like, do people care about security or not? You know, do people care about security when they're actually purchasing something through that new modality? So we would test things around security or authentication. You know, if you want to turn it to channel 13 from 26 or find the NCAA tournament, we really don't care who you are. But you know, if you want to buy the T-shirt or upload a credit card number, then we want to make sure we have right party contact. And so we'll run testing around, you know, what do people care about and why in situations like that.
I'm just going to reinforce what they said in terms of how you can help. So one of the things that we do a lot is we do a lot of test and learn, and so the velocity is really important. So one of the key measurements is what is our velocity of testing, and that can be really easy where it's you're doing something that's actually in a native app or on a website, digital. But the other is going out into the field, sitting with customers, especially travel has a huge safety and trust component to it. So going out and sitting with our travelers as they're trying to book, or sitting with our partners as they're setting up their property, or looking at that first inquiry coming in and feeling their pain. And then we'll prototype things and we'll show it to them and they'll give us feedback, and then we have a designer, we have an engineer, we have a product person, and they all scrum together, they tweak the prototype, and we do this in many, many different markets. The extent that you're talking about how you do that, just it validates so much more the value that you bring, because it's not just the product idea or prototype that you're working on, or the business or product idea, but it's that methodology that this reinforces it. So internally, we do a lot of test velocity measurements and idea throughput measurements, and we look for that externally as well.
Great. All right. I'm going to send my microphone out to the audience, and you all can ask your own questions. Who has anybody?
Let's go to the guy with the Bitcoin T-shirt on. He raised his hand 3 times earlier, and I'm interested in giving him a shot because we're at 6:15. So truth in advertising is Q&A time, and that's got to be. So this is a varied panel at Exxon, Discover, VRBO, University of Phoenix. So it's not all FinTech, but FinTech was one of the sponsoring groups. And so thank you for coming today. I'd be happy to visit with you after about that. If you need your company to prove something and you need a strategic partner, corporate's probably better. No one's going to say they give you just money. Andreessen Horowitz gives you money and connections. So there's congratulations on eight investments and an exit with some of those. Those are pretty heady company there.
Hello. My name's Alistair McPhail. I have a question. So if I have this understand it correctly, none of you operate innovation labs or accelerator programs per se, correct?
So I have.
Accelerator program, like where we bring classes of 6 companies
Right.
through
Yeah.
for 6
Yeah.
weeks.
Yeah. So I have operated a cohort, multiple cohort accelerator, as well as a corporate innovation lab and internal piece. So, but that was in a past life, not with UOP yet.
No, right. All your current companies. So I
Yes.
guess my question is, how would a startup know what's the right door to knock on at the company in that case?
I barely know what's the right door to knock on, to be honest, in most of them, right? And so, and that's not only because I've only been here for a year. I think that's really hard. One of the things is about knowing where you're entering the company. So if you are entering in an innovation space, you're going to be asked completely different questions than if you're going into, let's say someone out of customer service center said, hey, we need this feature or whatever. You're going to go through much more traditional sourcing pack. So there's no one right answer to know. I think you just have to sense when you get there, am I wasting my time or not, right? Because is the person that I'm talking to, do they have the ability to make this decision? Do you have a history of working with startups, and what is that, right? Because is legal going to kind of throw up on it when it gets there, or security and compliance, or whoever, right? So don't be afraid to ask those questions early, and then you'll get a sense for kind of, am I in the ballpark? Because there's no one right path for this, I would say.
So I hear you asking kind of a practical question, like who do I call or send an email to? Yeah. So let me give you 2 paths. So one, CEO, COO, CIO. We happen to be funded by the chief investment officer, and so come in through the top is one. And then the second would be to pick your area, and there's always conferences and speakers and people who show up on panels, and have somebody do a search. If you're in AI, go to the top 10 AI conferences and see who's showing up to speak and call that person.
Hey,
Other audience questions?
yeah, well, everybody in the back row has a question because they all got here late. So my name's Ted Feifelsky. I'm glad to be here and listen to you guys. I had a question specifically around when you do find that individual or individuals within an organization, what are some telltale signs that they're just really not interested?
Good question.
Don't return phone calls, don't return emails. Ghosting. Disappear after the first meeting.
What are signs that they are interested?
Yeah, I think the are interested can be a little challenging. I think it's actually one of the more challenging spots, which is, are they interested because they just want to find out more about what your idea is and how you're thinking about the market, or are they interested because it addresses a problem? And so I think that the challenge is if you do get in the door, you try and very quickly figure out what problem it is that they might have that you're addressing. And if you're having a hard time finding that, you might see how to make sure you're getting as much from those conversations as they are.
That's great.
Yeah.
Great point.
I wanted to quickly ask, this is more of a question for Michael, but kind of going back to that example that you gave with the astronaut movie, what do you think are some traits for someone who's that good communicator between the corporate and the startup needs? What are some positive traits that they might show?
I guess a good listener, and somebody who can then take something complex and talk about it simply is helpful. We have also somebody who's if it's a team situation, somebody who's willing to take a shot and articulate it and not being afraid that they're wrong. Like we've got a particular person on our team, her title is storyteller, and she is fabulous about putting out like a really crappy first effort at something and kind of pushing it off the cliff, and then having other people pile in to help make it better. But that's a hard question. What makes a good Capcom person? I think kind of the ability to operate in chaos, maybe the ability to filter out what's important and what's not important, and then to synthesize and make something approachable that maybe isn't that approachable.
If I can add to that, I would say in a corporation, depending on the size of the corporation, it's really important that the person has the internal network so they know who to talk to, right? Because many times you have, I don't know, in our case, geoscience technologies. I don't know anything about the geoscience, but I know people who know and might be interested. So these people are also important, the hubs of communication inside the corporation. I just want to address quickly when they're not interested, and I heard from a startup, Sensei, they're from here. We started talking about this, and I was like, yeah, maybe you can go this way or that way. And then the guy said, well, the second best answer is no. There's no business, right? So I think opening the door for the corporate to say no very directly without, no hard feelings, it's just not a fit, is also a good way for you to proactively tell them, hey, let's not waste time if this is not productive.
So when you're in a round, we're currently doing a Series A, and one of the investors is a strategic investor. I've just been told this week, actually, that has a chilling effect on the venture capital that also might come in on this round. Have you noticed that, and any suggestions?
Yeah, that used to be a very real issue, because the notion was that the strategic investor would hold hostage the future liquidity. But there's terms that can control that, and I think it has more to do with what's the nature and the reason they're getting involved, and whether or not your contract with a strategic investor and the expectations are well managed. Generally speaking, I have seen in the last 5-10 years that there's been a great shift towards that being valuable, right? Because done well, where they're not in control and they can't block your deal. I mean, the venture interest is, the main thing is they don't want them to block some sort of deal, right? And so as long as you take that into consideration and the investor can see a path to return, but you've got a cornerstone client who's covering your operational overhead, driving your product in a way that's not exclusive, can be a really valuable asset to maximize return. So it's shifting. Bottom line is it's shifting, and it's about how you structure it and who you're doing it with. So just be mindful of that. Any other comments?
So I think, one, expect not just your term sheet, but if you do a side letter on the strategic, there's a lot of interest in that, and be ready, because we probably spent in one where we were leading a Series A, but Salesforce Ventures and others were in there. We spent $150,000 plus of legal fees to get through the side letter and all that. So it's not just about whether it has a chilling effect. Because we didn't want it to limit anything, but we wanted to be protected both back and forth. And so it's not easy, but it worked out in the end, which was great. Again, but just be prepared for that as you're going through it.
Where's the mic? Oh, just speak up if you have the mic. Go for it.
Yes. Hi. I work for the Colombian government here in Austin, and one of the things that I'm always looking for is bringing the startups here to the U.S. And I have seen, San Francisco, Boston, Miami, they are very open to working with international companies, but I have not seen that. Maybe that disposition here in Texas. But I was wondering, for example, what will be the path that a company from international will take to work with some of these these corporations?
For us, and I think for Expedia, and we've done acquisitions globally. I think. First of all, it's just tapping into the local, if there is a local presence, like whether it's a sales arm, depending on how big it is. If there's a GM, like get them to sponsor it through. Otherwise, you would go to the same executive leadership, and you really have to connect the dots on again why it can augment the business, and particularly does it do it in a way that's helps them expand and scale. So, I mean, it's kind of the same steps. But if a company's already global, if you can get an executive that heads up Asia or Europe, then that's a good way for them to almost play that role of the communication of trying to connect like what the opportunity is.
So I'll second that as well, because I work for Asia and Europe as well. I think the most important point is how are you going to help the local business develop there, right? So are you helping specifically the Colombian business, or are you trying to just, the corporate that is based there and has a presence there, or are you trying just to benefit the startup? So how are you going to create this mutual value? And then it can quickly, become a discussion on, okay, you're based in Colombia, so how am I going to deal with my corporation? The headquarters is in Houston or somewhere else. So it becomes a relationship challenge. So I think you have a better luck if you're addressing the local market as opposed to the headquarters.
If you're not familiar with Fred Schmidt from Capital Factory, he runs the international program, so definitely follow up with him if that's a good connection. All right, we've got time for maybe 2 more questions.
Okay, I'm glad I got squeezed in. Well, corporate ventures and venture capital firms, there is a differentiation. One of them is a financial investor, another one is strategic investor. And financial investors always say, like, look, I'm not in the business of operating businesses or running businesses, so I'm no threat to the ideas or the information you share with me. I'm not going to run one of these ideas unless you are the one running it. On the other hand, corporate ventures are on the opposite side. Although they do bring a lot of synergy, you're in a position, you're sharing a lot of information, which might actually cost you to gather that information, such as product market fit, etc., like that, and to convince the potential investors, you're sharing all that. And in my past life, I did investing, and inevitably, I did benefit from one presentation to the companies that I sit on the boards of. So how do you balance this, and is there any kind of mechanisms in the deals that you go in that will comfort entrepreneurs when they're working with you? Because while I was working at Qualcomm, one of the things we did acquiring patents was actually we acquired patents specifically with the intention of killing that invention because it was not going in the direction the company was going towards. So wanted to get your feelings on that because this is a very sticky issue. And I know a specific company example or a vertical could be a better to take a shot at that, and feel free to take your own examples on to take that shot. Thank you.
Who wants to tackle that? I got brain drained as an entrepreneur by a publicly traded company that wanted to acquire us, and they took advantage of my financial obligation to my board to disclose the opportunity, and then went through due diligence and put a term sheet together that was just enough, and but nothing's really binding at that point. And so yeah, there is a risk to early stage companies. I think I had my top 4 people in a 15-person company engaged in that transaction, and we spent tens, maybe $100,000 in legal fees, and all for naught. So anyway, that's my sob story. Gotta go.
I was going to say, don't presume that the VC is not talking to other companies in their portfolio or looking at the next company and still using the information. So a little self-serving because we're a corporate who might be accused of stealing all your ideas, but the corporates do have talks with people all around the globe, and they're not in a position oftentimes to sign non-competes or to provide a lot of comfort. But there's not talking to a financial investor is not risk-free either.
And I would just say, so having been in that seat, and it was something that was more of a feature add-on to our platform, the risk is you can rewrite that relatively quickly for the good ideas that are in it, and it's hard to protect that. But I think what we worked with, we worked with the startup to make sure that they diversified their revenue sources fairly quickly. We didn't want to be their only customer, right, for that reason. And so I think the speed with which that can happen kept them rolling no matter what happened. We did also do a 2-year contract after the fact because of the fact that we wanted to keep it as part of it. But again, after that 2 years, there's nothing that says that we have hundreds of developers in cases that can throw things at it and do whatever. But at the end of the day, it never rose to the top of our problems because it was working and everything was good, right? And it was an equitable thing. So I'd say protect yourself by kind of diversifying. And if your partner is telling you that they don't want you to do that, then that's kind of a red flag, I would say.
Time for, where's the mic? Maybe one more. How many more questions do we have? Oh, we've got a bunch. All right, last question.
Oh, thank you everyone for the panel. It's been really great and very insightful. One question that I have, and this is just an observation, I apologize if I missed it, but It sounds like you all are sourcing your innovation outside of the company. And I was just curious as to, because I'm familiar with other companies that have internal innovation mechanisms in place. Why is that, or is that happening at any of your companies right now?
We did start an internal venture at the previous place, and I will tell you, we purposefully co-located it with the startup accelerator as well as a co-working space because we don't know how to do that. Like that muscle memory isn't necessarily there, right? And so in that co-location, we found some of our best people that went down there on a process actually left and went to startups in some cases, and we encouraged that, right? That was great because they would come back if we had a culture and whatever. So you can't be afraid of that. But also then it was kind of the reverse as well. So someone that's run one of these things that maybe doesn't actually have a great future, it's not a great exit, whatever, but they're really well prepared to run one of these internal things and come on board with us. And so we saw that as a kind of a mutual piece. I will tell you the hard thing for doing it internally is if you don't protect it, it's taking away resources from making the number. So whatever the number is, the quarterly number or the investor number or whatever it is, the minute you start taking resources away because it looks like it's going well, then all of a sudden the threat, like when it's just kind of that thing over in the lab that, oh, look at that, that new IoT device or whatever, it's pretty safe. But when it starts to feel like it's going to pull some things away to try to grow is when then the white blood cells again come in.
I was just going to say, most of ours is internal, and you have to kind of ring fence it, you have to protect it. The most dangerous time is when there's, it looks like it's successful, and then it's transitioning, because you do have to add more resources, you're taking from kind of core investment, and then the team, which got to work in a very kind of small, fast, rapid environment, is all of a sudden has all this visibility and pressure. And so I spend actually a lot of time with 3 different things right now, sort of trying to grow them and protect them, and grow them and protect them, and like set expectations. And some, I've had a product manager or two who love that part, and then when that pressure then ratchets it up, it's not what they want to do. And so, we have to have that difficult conversation and make sure you get the right people at the right spots.
We fish internally too, and we have small group gatherings that are called Dinners for Geeks. We have demo days. We have IoT Garage, where we kickstart internal projects. So we look internally also. We've got an innovation council that has SVP level, kind of top down. We want to spend money on this, and then we also have a tool called Spigot. You turn the fire hose on a particular problem, and so we do some things internally.
Same here. We have done a bunch of internal projects as well. We're now looking externally as well. We're not biased to one another. We will make an analysis, buy, build, partner, and then we're going to decide based on the economics.
Awesome, great questions. We still have we have time, we have drinks, we have food. If you have questions, feel free to stick around and ask them. Thanks to our panelists for joining us. Several folks came in from out of town, so thank you very much for joining us and making the trip. Thanks to all y'all for coming. Our next corporate innovation meetup is June 24th. We're going to stick with the Monday 5 to 7 unless we get like an uproar from people. We kind of felt like there's not a lot going on Monday nights. How many people would really rather it not be on Monday night? Awesome. Monday, June 24th.
Isn't that survivorship bias?
Yeah, it's a little bit biased, but we're going to roll with it. And also, we really want feedback from y'all about the things that you want to hear. If there's somebody you want to hear from, if there's topics you want to talk about, feel free to email me at jackson@softmatch.com, and we'll get some good scheduling going. So we're going to do this every 2 months, and really appreciate your joining us and being part of the community. So thank you, and have a drink. Have a drink. Thank you. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you. Yeah, very nice to meet you. Yeah. Good job. I find that we are all kind of the same space. Not, give it or take like that.
Analogous issues.
Working startup. It's a high, I guess, almost a little bit of fun, I guess. We're trying to learn what our place is.
Maybe we should separate. Hi, Mike Hansen. Nice meeting you. Nice to meet you. Hi, Sebastian.
I'm a fractional CTO at a startup that's Tech. Helping manage third-party risk.
Okay.
Would you be the right contact maybe to
Yeah. We have a lot of people who pay attention to regulatory issues. We don't have a formal RegTech vertical. I can get you to the right neighborhood.
So they absolutely, this is my card. Peaks and valleys, everything.
like
And so what we generally try to do is like, okay, where is your next
There's different people who take all of the regulatory bodies that you are subject to and kind of put together a by product checklist or by service checklist that helps you comply with. There's decades-old internal system for compliance.
Right. Yeah. This is kind of the next gen from what you're describing. The way it works is basically it actually have technology so that each third party make self-assessments, when the assessments are actually reaching out to their specific situation. So the business manager or somebody that knows how the business operates can actually go through the assessment, but the system is smart to adapt for their specific situation.
What kinds of compliance issues have you dealt with?
Yeah, so right now we're working mostly with
And I have a company I work with here that so I would love.
I'm on the technology side. The founder's attorney, he gets spoken about regulations.
Yeah,
Sebastian, thank you for saying hi.
Yeah,
Send it my way. We'll see if we can get it right.
Excellent. Well, then, thank you. Thank you for
So I'm working with her on doing some programs for digital health.
It's all about is it in a place that
We just started talking about it. So we're not project yet, but yeah.
Hi. Nathan, sure.
She was working in Turkey and then I recruited her to MSTC, which is Master of Science in Technology Commercialization. Are you familiar with that?
Only because Melanie mentioned it earlier.
Oh, yeah. And she's my class. She's studying that, actually. So now she's trying to innovate in the financial because they have centralized that. And I don't want to introduce you guys to see.
Yeah, we did we processed all of the non-mortgage transactions.
This is like, did you meet Jackson? Oh, I haven't met Jackson. I feel like I love you. You're so awesome.
Is there a particular area of focus that you have? What technologies do you like? What do you hear about?
You are just like, you're the best at the question.
Well, what I was actually thinking about, I launched a global commercialization agency here in Austin. What it does is it creates some international patents where you can actually commercialize them all across because we're also like assets in the universities and learning in startup, but their economy is suitable for commercialization. So that is for cross-border commercialization. Unfortunately, what I see becomes more and more is internationalizing IT. And I see the problem with all these data out there, right? And none of these companies want to share data with each other, and they want the insights and the parts of data for each. So utilizing the blockchain technology, right? We're hoping that without being able to look like a auto-optimized, centralized data, in the middle, looking at being able to map the data I have with the data you have, but you don't know which data I have custom record 1 and 2, right? And I will send you location information without knowing yet which one is this location, which one is that location. Yet you will get 50% of your customers are located in this place, even if you didn't have a location around that. And there are a lot of innovations coming in that space.
and I want to roll that out for basically fraud detection and customer acquisition. One of the events that I had before a competition in New York City, the city that never sleeps, Fintech Hackathon. What it does is basically replaces your social security number with your phone number. And it is very contradictory on the surface of it because your phone number is very public, you share with everyone. And social security number you hide very secretly, yet it is your financial history, your ability to pay back, etc. Your financial score. So we figured that with all these immigrants and refugees actually flood into the US, they are unable to integrate into the society without cash transactions. So if people are able to use mobile payments through using their cell phone numbers, right, you are easily identifying this person and letting them do some kind of payment or some kind of transaction that they can eventually get into the financial system with as relevant as a social security number. Because they are able to a lot of data more than a FICO score can do. Because now we are doing this class. We can attach that to a lot of factors like Facebook. You know how all that data is out there already. So we are able to get a lot better with this data. So I want to roll out that kind of technology. And that's what I think Neil is using her expertise in banking. I didn't think I could do this. I was working at American Express actually. I sold one of my startups and I was involved in integrating startups. So that's how I know how to do it. So I never finished it. But then I went to University of Edinburgh to study innovation, master of innovation and technology at the people. So now anyways, what I'm trying to do is really bring those together for protecting the fraud and basically upsell cross-sell opportunities among consumers that we might not even have a social security number for. Underbank,
commercial payments and boarding vendors, we with Nacho built a directory like you described. You don't have to share the information, but she can look up your customers and go on the Nacho website has some information about that. We have Nacho, National ACH Association, NACH. Okay, it's analogous to what you're describing. Yes, it's a good idea for you also done some things around trusting a phone number has a bunch of regulatory issues, but it is a good problem.
Yeah, so we've been looking at those problems, but obviously when you roll these kind of products out there, I'm a big believer in creating that tipping point and critical mass for the need to partner with a large organization that already has the customer base, so that this does make an impact and it can actually, it is an aside that I can actually create a network effect with it. So
we could have maybe a 30-minute call and talk about that sort of concept and bringing over certain ideas here.
Sounds good. Thank you. That'd be great. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. I wasn't. How's it going? I'm glad I came. What was your question about? Well, one of the companies raised $10 million. Valuation is $12 million. They're from here. They moved to San Francisco. Are you from here? I live in Houston. So they got picked up by White College. It's not Robinson.